In a world of casual relationships and hookup culture and a trend of objectifying ourselves and those we encounter, feelings are muddy business with emotions like heartbreak, jealousy, and hatred at the forefront sometimes. If you're the heartbreaker, you probably consider yourself the luckier one of the two parties, but that's not always the truth. You never truly know what the heartbroken is capable of doing when pushed to the edge. This is a story that exemplifies that dynamic, one where the heartbreaker seemed too quick to move on and the heartbroken hell-bent on making sure he doesn't. This is a story that shook London in the late 2000s. This is the story of lucky Cheema and Lakhvir Singh. Hi everyone, welcome to the Desi Crime Podcast, a show where we dive deep into some of the craziest cases from around South Asia. I'm your host Aishwarya.
And I'm Aryan.
And the case that I have for you today is one that will make you think twice about that breakup I know you're thinking of going through with. I have to tell you, this is a story about a poisoning. A story where there was something in a dish that wasn't supposed to be there. The couple in this case did not know the whole truth. Which brings us to today's sponsor, The Whole Truth Foods.
When they write their list of ingredients for their bars and protein powders, they give you the unabashed truth. The whole truth.
No additives, no sneaky little small font, no asterisk at the bottom that they want you to miss. Most protein powders on the market don't foam.
That's because of the unhealthy anti-foaming agents in there.
They taste exactly like a milkshake.
That's because of the added artificial flavors and sugars.
Or they have a shelf life of 2 years.
That's because of the ultra-processed chemicals that preserve the protein but not necessarily your health.
Yup, we've been using the whole truth protein because it's the cleanest and honestly the tastiest protein on the market right now.
So if you want to go get it yourself, head to thewholetruthfoods.com and use the code DESI20 at checkout for 20% off your order.
And now back to the episode. For this episode, I'm taking you to a humble home located on Princes Road in Feltham, West London. It was a chilly evening on the 27th of January 2009 when a newly engaged couple, Lakhvir Lucky Cheema and Gurjeet Chung, were getting ready to eat dinner. 39-year-old Lucky and 21-year-old Gurjeet had quite an age gap, especially considering the two had first met when she was just 19 and he was 37. But with both their families hailing from rural Punjab, that wasn't really much of a factor they were concerned about. While Lucky had been living in the UK for many years now, to Gurjeet, the country was as new as the English language. Yet, in 2008, she arrived in West London to begin a new life with the man she had fallen in love with. To them, their love story was just as beautiful as any other. The two had been introduced to each other by Lucky's sister, who thought they'd be a good match for each other, and surely they immediately hit it off. For the first time in almost 20 years, Lucky felt at home. You see, Lucky had gotten married when he was very young to a woman he wasn't necessarily compatible with. After a few years of fighting and hurt and heartbreak, Lucky and his first wife got a divorce when he was just 21.
Do we know what the issues in compatibility between the two were?
No, we don't, unfortunately. There's very little about Lucky Cheema's first marriage. We don't even know the name of the woman he was married to.
So, but we don't know whose fault, so to say it was.
Yeah, right. We don't. For Lucky, going through a life change as enormous as a divorce at the tender age of 21, he suddenly became very cynical about love in general. And so he spent the next almost 20 years of his life going through casual relationships until by the age of 39, when he had enough. He was lonely, he craved companionship, he craved love, and he believed he deserved love. And that's when Gurjeet walked into his life. The two had gotten engaged in 2008 and were set on getting married on Valentine's Day of 2009, just 18 days later. With wedding preparations in full force, that evening at their West London home must have been like the others over the last few weeks. Exciting, hectic, hopeful. By the time dinner rolled around, the couple were in no energy to cook something from scratch, and that worked because there was a batch of really yum chicken curry kept in the fridge. I just want to point out at this stage that because this is an Indian case taking place in the UK, of course they called it chicken curry, and I'm sure that bothers some of you. Unfortunately, the Western media never bothered to figure out exactly what dish this was, and so chicken curry is what we'll be calling it for the rest of the episode too.
So it could have been butter chicken.
It could have been chicken
masala,
keema, korma, literally like
chicken curry.
100 kinds of things.
Generalizing
chicken
it.
curry.
That's the crime in and of itself.
Absolutely. Anyway, the two were hungry. Lucky more so. And so they set their dinner table, took out their cutlery, reheated the chicken curry, and began to dig in. I imagine that scene in my mind, the two giggling and laughing and possibly discussing life together in this honeymoon phase of their new relationship. I imagine Lucky reaching for the curry a second time. He was very hungry after all. And then I imagine things take a turn for the worse. And that is exactly what happened. Slowly, Lucky began to feel kind of off. Nothing he could immediately put a finger on, but just a weird sensation traveling through his body he couldn't quite explain. This weird sensation then traveled to his face, slowly making it go numb, preventing him from talking or even expressing his pain properly. The spoon he was eating with fell from his hand to the ground as his limbs gave way. Something within him was causing his nervous system to shut down. As he's beginning to feel this, he knows something is very wrong and quickly asks Gurjeet to call his sister, who also lives in London. By the time Gurjeet picks up the phone to make the call, she too is beginning to feel what Lucky described, only a lot less intensely. And so she takes it upon herself to make sure that they both survive. She first places the call to Lucky's sister and then dials the police emergency number next. On this call to the police, Gurjeet tells them something eerie. She tells them she thinks she and her husband have been poisoned, and she knows who did it, a woman named Lakhvir Singh. While trying to give the police as much detail as she can, the reality is that Gurjeet too is slowly getting sick. In the dining room, Lucky has fallen to the ground, and the nature of his poison is such that it prevents him from even fainting. It's making him experience his body slowly giving way, slowly asphyxiating, while he's wide awake. Before the ambulance, Lucky's sister manages to arrive in her car along with her two sons, who carried Lucky from the home to the car and then carried Gurjeet too, and rushed through London traffic to the nearby local West Middlesex University Hospital. At this hospital, both Lucky and Gurjeet are profusely throwing up and sweating a lot. Lucky seems to be getting very pale slowly, with difficulty moving any muscles. When taken into the ICU, Lucky developed a quote, unusual cardiac arrhythmia, meaning an unusual heartbeat and rhythm, and started telling the doctors that he was having trouble seeing and was slowly losing his vision. The doctors can tell from all of these symptoms that Lucky and Gurjeet were poisoned, but they have not the slightest clue what poison. To say they were puzzled at that moment was a gross understatement. They went so far as to contact the UK's National Poisons Unit and explain to them the symptoms they were seeing in Lucky, but the window of opportunity was too short. At the hospital, Lucky went into multiple organ failure and began to asphyxiate. Without knowing what was happening to him, the doctors couldn't do much to save him. And so in front of their eyes, Lakhvinder Lucky Cheema slowly drifted into unconsciousness till he died. In a different room at the hospital, Gurjeet's condition was worsening too, but the doctors quickly put her in a medically induced coma and managed to barely save her life by pumping her up with antidotes.
No way. So the response these two have had to whatever poison, and again this is allegedly poison up to this point, has been, the difference in reaction has been because of the quantity of food that you have eaten, right?
Yep.
So my guy had an appetite, he went ham, and that's caused the rapid decline in his condition.
He went for second servings, we know that, while Gurjeet did not, yeah. That one less serving of the chicken curry meant that Gurjeet had survived. By the time she woke up, weeks had passed to her last memory, and her life had turned upside down.
Wow.
The date of her wedding had passed. Yet no wedding took place, no celebrations were held, and Valentine's Day passed in sorrow for the families of the couple. When Gurjeet learned of her fiancé's death, her heart broke. She was told that the pathology report on Lucky was back, and in a rarity like never before, the doctors from the pathology department said they were not sure what had caused Lucky's death. A very famous forensic toxicologist, Dr. Denise Stanworth, had been taken on board by the police to get to the bottom of this mystery toxin, and she now needed Gurjeet's help in determining what exactly happened to her and Lucky. While the police were detailing all of this to Gurjeet, all that was on her mind was that everything had been snatched away from her. And the entire time she thought of the life she could have had, she thought of the one person she knew had snatched it away from her. The same person whose name she had given to the UK police on call, Lakhvir Singh.
As usually in these stories where there's a couple involved, there's a huge age gap and questions of poisoning might come up. I assumed it was Lucky who was the killer because he's almost 20 years older,
Right.
and I was looking, I was almost expecting him to be the
And
criminal.
Gurjeet to die.
And
in the
Gurjeet to
process,
die,
right?
and you've just flipped the script on me and added this third character. I wasn't expecting this.
And that's totally fair because I can count on our fingers how many cases we've had where women are the perpetrators
Yeah.
of the crime. So it's a fair assumption to make, but this case is different. Now, who was this third person Aryan mentions? Who was Lakhvir? And why did Gurjeet think she had something to do with this random bout of poisoning the two experienced? For that, we have to go back to the year 1993, when Lucky's first marriage had ended in divorce and he had no home to stay in. That year, through mutual Desi connections in London, Lucky Cheema had run into a much older woman named Lakhvir Kaur Singh, who seemed to take a liking to him. While Lucky was trying to get his bearings on his life, Lakhvir had been kind enough to open up her home to Lucky, letting him stay with her, her husband, and her 3 kids while he worked to save money and find a place for himself.
Do we know why she took a liking to him? Was it a romantic thing or...
It's about to turn romantic. We'll see that. I don't know if she felt that like right off the bat and so wanted to do it, or just through Desi connections. You know,
Right.
she heard a good word about this young guy who's kind of had gone through a divorce.
And was her husband and her children equally open to...
Yeah, in the beginning.
Yeah?
Yep. And so Lucky moved into Lakhvir's home. But when Lucky moved into Lakhvir's home, something rather unexpected happened. Lucky noticed the prison Lakhvir was in. She was married to a much older man, a man named Onkar, whom she felt no love for, someone who she never truly understood or considered a real partner in life. And so, somewhere along the way, with Lucky living in Lakhvir's home, the two began to have an affair. At the start of it, the goals were clear. This was completely meant to be casual, and there were a few reasons for that on both sides. For Lakhvir, this was casual because she was a woman with 3 kids. She wasn't leaving her husband and shaming herself and her kids in the eyes of the world to be with a much younger man. Secondly, her husband Onkar had been diagnosed with cancer, and while she might not love him romantically, she felt love for him and felt the obligation to care for him. For Lucky, this was casual too. Firstly, he had just ended a marriage, and to throw himself back into a serious relationship was absolutely the last thing he wanted to do. Secondly, this was a much older woman. She had kids, she had a husband, a home, a whole life, all while he was trying to merely make sense of his as a young 20-some-year-old. But while these were the reasons they didn't want anything serious with each other, these were also the very reasons they found themselves attracted to in each other. Lucky's youth was the excitement Lakhvir was yearning for. Her husband's cancer treatment was going on outside the UK, giving her and Lucky the perfect opportunity to have an affair and hide it. Lakhvir's age and a whole other life was exactly the emotionally distant stability that Lucky was looking for. And so there it was, right under the roof of the Singh family home, an illicit extramarital affair that the couple thought they had control over. And things kept going great. Lakhvir's husband never found out, and Lucky continued on with his life guilt-free. Eventually, after a few months of saving up some money and getting a job, Lucky moved out of the Singh home and got an apartment of his own, the spare key to which was only with one other person, Lakhvir. Right now, I'm sure not much sounds out of the ordinary, other than the fact, obviously, that this is an extramarital affair. But what I mean is, how we went from this to a poisoning isn't fully clear yet. But it will become clear when I tell you that this casual extramarital affair went on not for a few months, or a year, or a few years even. It went on for 16.
That's called a marriage.
That is called a marriage.
That's better than most marriages. Actually, that's pretty
the
good.
life of a teenage child.
So
that is wild.
So almost until the age of 36.
Yeah, 37, 38 is when
he was sleeping with this woman.
Absolutely. Isn't that leading someone on? That is by no means casual in the ways.
Leading on is an understatement.
Yeah.
What do you mean leading on? Leading on is when, somebody texts me and, double taps my message. That's leading me on. This is way beyond leading me on.
This affair had gone on for 16 years. This affair saw Lakhvir's kids graduate from school and even graduate from college. It saw them both age. Lucky was 23 when the affair had started, and it saw him turn 30 and then 35 and then 39. It saw Lakhvir cross her 30s and enter her mid-40s. It had, by every standard, crossed the threshold of a casual relationship. The two had gone through a lot together over 16 years, including Lakhvir getting pregnant multiple times from sexual intercourse with Lucky. Each time, though, she was asked by Lucky to get the pregnancy terminated, and that is what she did. And then came the year 2008, the year this happy extramarital affair was going to turn into everyone's worst nightmare. By 2008, Lucky had had enough of the affair. Maybe he longed for a partner he could truly commit to, someone he could live in the same home with, have a real wedding with, start a true family with, someone he didn't have to hide away with in alleyways and dark corners. By this time, he had been introduced to Gurjeet when she was 19, but he had initially dismissed the idea of taking anything ahead with her. By 2008, though, Gurjeet was back on his mind. And now she was 21, which was, I guess, a little less weird than her being 19. When the topic of marriage got broached with Gurjeet and she and her family said yes, so did Lucky. And then it was time to end the affair. When Lucky broke the news of his upcoming engagement to Lakhvir, she couldn't believe what she was hearing. Never in her wildest dreams had she imagined that a 16-year-long relationship could just end overnight because of another person. And I don't blame her. Obviously, Lucky is the victim in this situation and nothing will take away from that. But he really did lead Lakhvir on. And like Aryan said, that is a gross understatement. He let the relationship go on for almost 2 decades, knowing very well it was going to end with only her heart being broken. At the end of it, she was going to have nobody while she would watch him move on over her in mere days right in front of her eyes. And that is quite literally exactly what happened.
Ash, I'm just going to push a little bit because we don't know the terms of their relationship, right? We don't know whether he had communicated to her that this will remain casual for the future, whether he had told her what his plans for having a long life were. I mean, again, it's a very extraordinary situation, a 16-year-long casual relationship. But as much as he was leading her on, I think so was she, right? It's not like she broached the topic of marriage at all. It wasn't like she said, she didn't push back when he asked for an abortion. So I don't see how I level the blame equally on both of them.
I don't necessarily agree with you, Aran, and there's multiple reasons for that. One of them I will reveal later in the episode. But
How convenient.
But one of them is the fact that, with the abortion situation, the way the articles mention it online, it's that Lakhvir didn't necessarily want an abortion every time Lucky made her go and get one. So in my mind, that's an indication of a woman who was possibly ready to leave everything behind and begin a new life with him.
Her husband was still alive at the old man diagnosed. So his cancer got better, or he was just...
we don't know. We know he was alive.
He was alive,
yeah.
Over the 16-year period.
And I'm sure maybe towards the later end of it, he was okay. We don't have reports on...
But he was alive.
So
Ash, again, I don't see how in that scenario she would want an abortion or she would want a child, because that would make her affair obvious.
But aside from the whole abortion thing, Aryan, I think another weird thing is just the power dynamic between the two of them. And I mentioned that kind of in the episode.
Sure.
Is that in this situation, obviously the person who will move on is going to be Lucky. He will find someone else to truly spend his life with. And I'm 100% sure he knew the entire time that she will not be the one to ever do that. She will continue to be in a loveless marriage. She will be the one who will get moved on from, who will get broken up with.
The heartbroken one.
Again,
Aishwarya, I concede to that only to say she's an adult. And I don't want to shift the blame on the man who ultimately died, because this dynamic, which you say, which does exist, but I don't think that absolves her of responsibility as well. That's all I'll
I
say.
think we'll come to points later about the kind of promises that were
Sure,
made on Lucky's
sure.
part.
Yeah.
I don't think we should absolve him of his blame because he was a victim. Obviously, that's tragic and she should receive the punishment she will.
Yeah.
But his blame in treating her the way he did. When Lucky broke off the affair, Lakhvir begged and pleaded with him, even suggesting that they could continue having the affair even after he got married. She didn't mind, she said, but Lucky was done, and she could see it on his face. She had been replaced by a younger woman, not much more different than her own husband, who had been replaced by a younger man in her life. In her mind, this was karma getting back at her for the way she had treated her own husband. As Lucky turned his back on her and left, Lakhvir broke. And then something in her flipped. She knew she was going to make his and his new fiance's life a living nightmare. She initially began by stalking the two, waiting outside their home, following them when they left, and watching them through their window while they stayed inside. On one particular occasion, as she stood outside their home's window and looked in the evening, she saw the both of them going into bed and cuddle together. And something about that sight drove Lakhvir crazy. She just couldn't stand it.
This sounds like right out of Baby Reindeer, the Netflix show.
She sounds insane, I know. She just couldn't stand this sight. She walked right over to their home, used the spare key she had, and barged straight in.
No.
She screamed at the two of them, telling Lucky that if she ever saw him in bed with his fiancée ever again, she would burn their house to the ground. For some weird reason, Lucky didn't take the gross intrusion of privacy very seriously, and so neither filed a police report against Lakhvir nor got the locks in his house changed. After this incident, Gurjeet ended up having a conversation with Lakhvir, woman to woman, in the hopes of getting through to her and telling her to back off and leave her husband alone. Quote, I knew she was jealous of my relationship with Lucky. I told her not to interfere in our lives any longer. I told her to forget everything that had gone on in the past. She said, I cannot forget the feelings that I have. I tried to reason with her quite a lot, but it had no effect on her. I told her that relationship has now ended because he is now engaged to me. End quote. Gurjeet told Lakhvir to forget Lucky, but even in this conversation, Lakhvir sounds less than apologetic or remorseful or willing to back off. Shortly after this incident, Lucky and Gurjeet made the official announcement of their wedding and set the date to be Valentine's Day 2009. And Lakhvir heard of the announcement. That is the day she made the decision to go to India for a few weeks. If you're thinking, phew, good Lakhvir, you go to India, you create some distance, you realign your life before coming back. Oh, how wrong you are. While we don't know the exact reason why Lakhvir decided to go to India randomly, we do know what she did there. She procured a very unique and specific herb, something called the Queen of Poisons or the Indian aconite, considered one of the oldest poisons in history. A rare and highly fatal plant species, only 1 gram of the aconite plant is enough to cause permanent bodily harm and even death. Grown primarily in North India and parts of the Himalayan mountains, it probably wasn't terribly hard for Lakhvir to find, considering her home was in Punjab, a state of India located in the north of the country. After a short trip in India, Lakhvir returned with the herbs packed away in her suitcase. And her path to getting Lucky and Gurjeet to digest the herbs was rather straightforward. She still had a key to Lucky's home, and he never bothered to get the locks changed. Upon arriving back in the UK, Lakhvir broke into the couple's home one evening on the 8th of December 2008 and opened the fridge to find something the couple would be likely to eat. She took her packet of herbs and mixed a whole bunch of it in their food, only to sneak out without arousing suspicion. For the next few hours, she watched the couple get sick in the home and call an ambulance to go to the West Middlesex University Hospital, where both Lucky and Gurjeet stayed admitted for many weeks, but the doctors were unable to determine the true cause of their illness. But Lakhvir had messed up. She had failed to put enough of the poison into their food. According to forensic toxicologist Dr. Denise Stanworth, who helped London police crack this case, this behavior of underestimating the dose of poison when trying to kill someone using it is very common. So a common feature in people who are being poisoned by someone else will be unexplained and sudden illness that almost got lethal but didn't quite. And it could mean that another more serious attack is coming. And that is exactly what happened to Lucky and Gurjeet. The two had, by January of 2009, ignored a few too many signs of the impending disaster that was awaiting them. The threats, the breaking in, her access to their home, their sudden illness that doctors couldn't explain, they had ignored it all. And then came the evening of January 27th. Lakhvir easily used a key and slipped into the couple's home, where she opened their fridge to find a box of the chicken curry, into which she slipped a packet of the aconite, after which she quietly left the home and watched from outside as the police and ambulance arrived and took the two away. She must have breathed a sigh of relief. She must have felt some contentment at finally accomplishing what she had been trying to do for so many weeks now. Only she had made one mistake. She didn't account for the fact that Gurjeet simply may not be as hungry as Lucky, thereby surviving and testifying against her to the police. And that's exactly what happened. Gurjeet told the police everything she and Lucky had been experiencing for the last few months, and then the police knew Lakhvir was going to be suspect number one. And the fact of the matter is, Lakhvir made it very easy to consider her suspect number one. She displayed no sense of planning or caution. The moment the police called her in for questioning, she panicked and stated she did know who tried to kill the couple, and it wasn't her, but it was her brother-in-law. When questioned a little more on why she thought that and why her brother-in-law would kill her ex and his new fiancé, she stumbled and panicked. She also didn't really take care of the fact that she had been leaving traces of the aconite everywhere she went. Traces were left in the chicken curry that still sat in Gurjeet and Lucky's fridge, of course. The police also found traces of it in her coat pocket, where she had most likely kept it on her way to the couple's home, and they also found a ton of aconite in her room as well. But at this point, the police had no idea what poison it was that had been used to poison the couple. Interestingly, it was 19th century Victorian literature that helped the doctors realize that the face numbing experienced by Lucky was unique to aconites among all poisons. That made the death of Lucky only the second aconite case in England since 1882. Wow. The doctors then sent the aconite samples to the Royal Botanical Gardens for analysis, where it was confirmed it was Indian aconite. That, combined with the fact that the police found records of her visit to India, the country where aconite is known to grow, just weeks before the poisoning incidents began, made them sure that Lakhvir was their murderer. When the forensics team tested the traces from Lakhvir's pocket to the traces in the chicken, it was an absolute match. The trial against Lakhvir Kaur Singh began in 2010 at the Old Bailey, with there being very little in the trial to save Lakhvir. The jury deliberated over the verdict for 4 days and came back with a unanimous decision. By the end of 2010, she was convicted of the murder of Lucky Cheema and the attempted murder of Gurjeet Chung. She was also found guilty of the previous attempt, where she had poisoned the couple, but both had survived. She was given life in prison with a, quote, minimum requirement to serve at least 23 years due to the cold planning and execution of her crime, end quote. Today, it has been 15 years since the death of Lucky. The only person who survived this vicious attack was the now 36-year-old Gurjeet. In the aftermath of the case, she said, quote, "I feel very tense. My life has stopped. First, you think you will get married and start a new life, but this changed it all. I still have those memories of my future with him, but he has gone and it's finished. I constantly think about what my future is going to be and about what has happened, and it makes me very upset," end quote. Once she had a chance to process her grief a little, she revealed that she now realizes she never truly knew how much Lucky had lied to Lakhvir until trial began. Quote, "Lucky had said to Lakhvir that he would not get married to anyone else apart from her. I had met Lakhvir in Lucky's house and I spoke to her. She told me that their relatives were aware that they were lovers. I explained to Lakhvir that she had 3 children and a husband who was ill in the hospital, but she said she could not control her feelings for Lucky. I had a heart-to-heart with her, and then I challenged Lucky on it. He just said she was bragging about it," end quote. Gurjeet has gone on to say that while she remembers Lucky fondly, she does believe she agreed to marry him a little too quickly. There were so many red flags that should have made her take it slow, made her find out more about Lucky's relationship with Lakhvir. Today, Gurjeet is completely out of the public eye, possibly having changed her name too. Most likely she is married to someone, most likely she has kids of her own. All I hope for her is that she's not being treated like everyone in this case was treated by someone else. I hope she isn't being treated like Onkar, a sick husband being lied to and betrayed by his wife and the mother of his children. I hope she isn't being treated like Lucky, stalked and obsessed over with no regard for his feelings and happiness. I even hope she isn't being treated like Lakhvir either, lied to and humiliated and left when it became convenient. I really hope with the bottom of my heart that Gurjeet went on to become the only person in this case who ever got to experience true love. If you like what we do here at Desi Studios and absolutely love what we're wearing today, this is merch you can go buy all for yourself.
You can buy this Desi Crime merch in our YouTube store on the link down below at Kadak Merch. Keep the engines at Desi Studios rolling so we can pay our videographer right behind the camera to make these amazing episodes just for you.